Hi, well, welcome everybody. Let's see here. Sue, Melissa, João, everybody's here. Well, thank you very much to join us. Thank you very much to being here with us again for this 12 p.m. session. This is the Globalfy Talks, where we're going to go, and today we're going to go to specifically fintechs and payment cross-border into different markets. So before I start, I'll just give a quick information in Portuguese and Spanish regarding translation. Então, eu sei que essa não é a primeira sessão do dia, então talvez você já esteja escutando esse áudio em português, mas se você está no áudio em inglês e você quer escutar em português, você tem a opção embaixo no seu Zoom, clicar em Interpretation e aí então selecionar português. Mira, yo sé que esa no es la primera llamada del día, entonces se necesita tener este audio, esta conversación en español, por favor, clic en interpretación en tu Zoom y podrá cambiar para español o portugués o seguir acá a escucharnos en inglés. Well, so that's it. Thank you very much. Well, I'll start by introduce myself and then, of course, introduce my guest. So I'm Diego Sampaio. I'm co-founder, CEO here at Globalfy. Well, you all know what Globalfy does, but I'm based here. I'm from Brazil. I'm based here in the US, and it's a pleasure to have myself here today, Melissa. So Melissa, please, a quick introduction about yourself and what you guys doing.
Thanks, Diego. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Melissa Frackman, I'm CEO and founding partner of Emphasis Ventures. We go by MVC. And we are a boutique venture capital fund specifically for cross-border emerging markets, fintech, and commerce. We have a pan-emerging markets view all over the world with a very India-centric approach. So we particularly help companies in India scale up both to the US, to Latin America, and globally, and then also help companies all over the world, including Latin America and Africa, come to South Asia and India. I've been working in the space for a long time and look forward to more collaboration.
And Melissa, thank you very much for being here with us. Now, Sue, your turn.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. My name is Sue. I'm the director of HubFX. HubFX is a London-based global account provider. We help UK, EU, US clients to have their named bank accounts. In the case of helping Globalfy clients specifically, our aim is to help Europe-based clients to expand or move their businesses to the US with their currency accounts and exchange rate risk management. You can find more information on hubfx.co/Globalfy or scan the QR code here.
Nice, thank you very much. So, thank you very much. João, your turn, man.
Yeah, thanks, Diego, and thank you everyone. Thanks everyone for being here and for the opportunity for me to be here as well. So I'm João. I'm not Brazilian. I'm Portuguese. My background is in actually computer science. So I'm a techie. But about 20 years ago, I went into AI and did a PhD in AI and have been applying it to different industries ever since, namely payments. So in payments, a few years back, a little bit out of frustration with existing vendors, I started Fraudio in Amsterdam. So we are a Dutch company effectively. And we ever since we've been working on blocking and stopping fraud and financial crime in payments, and we were pretty global these days. We have customers in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, in Latin America, not in the US as of today. And we help them with payment fraud detection, cards, especially card payments. Also with merchant-initiated frauds, which is something that once you start doing cross-border in the payments industry, it becomes really very relevant. So merchants who initiate fraud themselves, and then money laundering. We have a strong anti-money laundering product as well.
Nice. So, well, João, as you mentioned, you guys operate into different markets, right? what are the key difference? Because your product, although can be used all over the world, it makes sense, and you collect a lot of data from each one of the markets that you guys are playing, right? So how do you see the main difference between fraud patterns and running a fintech company in LATAM or in Europe and Asia, for example?
Yeah, so from a fraud perspective, it's actually surprisingly homogeneous globally.
Really?
So there are some quirks, but the fraudsters and fraudster networks these days are global. So we see some regional trends, but we've seen major fraud attacks that actually spanned multiple continents. So, for instance, cards issued in Singapore being used in merchants that were colluding with the network in Uruguay and Brazil. So, and this happens on a daily basis. To be frank, also the fraud figures in terms of fraud rates from a merchant initiated perspective, they are pretty much the same globally. But not from a card abuse perspective. So there, Latin America is a leader. It's probably not the best ranking to lead, but we see countries like Brazil and Mexico, Colombia to some extent being hit hard. And then Europe is a little bit safer in general. The countries that we are present in Asia, Indonesia, Singapore, are also a little bit better than Latin America. But I would say, so from a fraud perspective, the trends do exist, and there are regional regional variants, but it's ultimately pretty much the same. But doing business in these different regions, that's a completely different story. So doing business in Europe, it's probably even impossible to generalize Europe as just being one market. But going, say, from doing business in Germany or in the Netherlands to doing business in Singapore, it's really very different. I would say it's probably more similar to the business in Portugal or Spain, and then move to Brazil or to Colombia, than it is to do business in the Netherlands and then try to do business in Indonesia. It's really different. I'm sure that we'll have time to go into it.
Nice, perfect. And Melissa, I remember that when we met, you were talking about that you spend a lot of time, although you have two bases, right? New York and India, and they spent quite some time in India too. How do you see the difference between the markets? And when you're talking to startups looking to invest, or those startups that are based in India, for example, how do you see they position themselves to the global market? Do you think that those startups are already born looking to do business cross-border? They're more focused in the local market. How do you see that?
Sure. There's so many aspects to this question. I think that, as Joao mentioned, there's a lot of similarities and differences in different markets. But for a market as large as India, and it is the fastest growing, one of the largest consumer markets in the world, there's so much domestic demand for so many different kinds of businesses that not every single startup needs to look global. And that's very different than a startup building it for fintech in Singapore, where the domestic market isn't big enough. And for any kind of reasonable TAM that makes an entrepreneur want to dedicate decades of their life to it, they have to look global. So one is, when I either work with or advise Indian companies, I tell them you don't have to go global. It's not a prestige thing. Go global, come to the US, come to Europe, come to Latin America, if it makes sense for your product, if you're offering something unique. India, from a fintech perspective, we can talk more about it later if you'd like, is particularly ahead of many other countries on its kind of payment system, EKYC and otherwise. And so for some aspects of fintech, companies in India are 5 to 10 years ahead of many other countries in the world. And so those companies do have a competitive advantage to scale to other markets and bring innovation that's been tested in India and bring it somewhere else. I like to point out that India's largest state, Uttar Pradesh, has the same population as Brazil. So if a startup has, scaled there, it's a good testing ground. As well as the fact that India's open architecture payments ecosystem, UPI, which is real-time payments with no MDR, is a model on which another 50 countries around the world are looking. And so there's startups that can and then go global to other markets. When I was leading North America operations for Zomato, which is a recently IPO'd Indian unicorn in the food delivery commerce space, we found that there might have been too much assumption that countries around the world are the same. And when you come to the US, you need really strong partners on the fintech, banking, payments, infrastructure side, even tax, marketing, to really localize whatever you're doing, no matter how strong of a base you have in global markets around the world.
And how open is the Indian market for startups from outside going and approaching that specific market?
I'd say it's very specific on like what sector. India is a very kind of consumerist market. Domestic consumption drives a lot of the growth, which is why the market is relatively insulated from a lot of the global tech downturn that we're seeing otherwise. And that means that there's a lot of space for innovative brands or products to come to the market and scale in India. Western brands in particular and European brands do very well in India for the most part. That being said, because there's so many entrepreneurs and so much local context and it is opaque, it's not so easy for a company to pick up. And I often, over 17 years of doing this cross-border work with India, I've seen lots of companies pick up and try to just land in New Delhi or Bangalore and try to set up shop. And you really need strong local partners, context, awareness of the consumer and its, desires before being able to scale there. And I would give the same advice for companies scaling anywhere in the world.
Yeah, on the previous session that I had today with Alessio from Pipefy, he was mentioned that once you go to the new market, you really gotta think about the new market and not just put your product over there without making sure that you are reaching the local culture, the local guidelines and so on, right? So having that approach in making sure that once you expand to a new market, you are really not just translating, but you are adapting your product, your process, and your company to that market. It's really, really important. And Sue, you're based in UK, right? So yeah. I know that affects you guys work a lot with currencies, and something that we were talking about was hedging, right? Using different currencies or services too, and how fintech helps. How fintechs can help companies to protect their assets and currency exchange and so on using hedge. How do you see that?
Right. So basically, the one of the most talked about topics amongst our clients is obviously the dollar strengthening in the past year and a half or 2 years. So the dollar index, which is the index track the value of the dollar against major currencies, was at 90 at the beginning of 2021, and it went all the way up to 113. So 25% increase towards the October last year, so towards the end of last year. Which means a lot of clients of ours, they invoice in dollars. They budget their exchange rate at the date when they sign their contract at this low point. By having this trend of the dollars or the movement of the US dollar means day by day, when they were invoiced a month later, 2 months later, a quarter later, they're paying more euros, pesos, reals for the exact same dollar bill they are paying. So what we do is we provide forward trading tool for them to lock the rate for today so that they know exactly in 1 month, 3 months or a year time their euro, or how many euros, reals, pesos they're paying for the dollar bill. So that's one kind of like solution. Another is obviously having a dollar account, for example, with Globalfy, and you can invoice your clients in dollars, and you can calculate how many dollars expenditures that you have, and you can basically invoice the respective clients in dollars, so that you natural hedge your dollar expenditure.
And amazing. I mean, and it's really interesting how fintechs have been helping entrepreneurs and investors or or people from all over the world to actually protect their money into more stronger currencies. We see that a lot in some countries from Latin America, like on Argentina right now, right? That a lot of companies over there are trying to protect their assets and even their revenue in USD and maintain that money outside their country. Unfortunately, the same thing with other countries from Latin America. In the UK, right? When you talk about Libras, or when you talk about euros, right? Does companies from in Europe in general, they look to protect their revenue in somehow? And are they worried that much with currency conversion, or not as much as someone from Latin America, or more like in development country?
I think everyone worries about the fluctuation of the currency movement, especially when dollar is so expensive and they're not earning dollars. So I would normally give clients the advice that one, use the most valuable currency as your base currency. So obviously you always revisit that decision. For now, it seems to be the dollar. It is predicted the US dollar is going to be weakened in the next few months, but not as much as to the level of last year. Another advice is always use the currency that you spend the most as your base currency. And that is because for smaller companies, that's your essential, right, to cover your costs. And obviously bigger companies worry about, when they have extra revenue, what currency should they hold? But for smaller companies, it's more about, can I pay the next month massive dollar bill? Right, so that would be my suggestion to them. And yeah, to answer your question, everyone worries about how expensive dollar gets.
Yeah, but this is a much more, and sorry to interrupt, but this is a much more acute problem in certain countries where inflation rates are going through the roof, and historically where forex has been less stable. So there's a question in the chat box about Argentina specifically, and the other day I told you guys a story about this, and it goes to show how difficult the current situation is. So we lost the deal. A very interesting prospect in Argentina. We went through the wholesale cycle, and we reached the negotiation phase and the offer stage. And they said that simply they would never be able to afford to pay. So we invoice in Latin America, invoice our customers mostly in dollars, unless there's a very good reason not to. But in this case, the gap, the purchase power, so to say, of companies, that earn money in local currencies in certain countries in Latin America is just very very poor right now, and so their ability to buy products from abroad, and even more so from Europe, from the US. So where fortunately for us, our currencies are a little bit more stable. It just went down very significantly over the last year, and so we ended up losing that deal, and they ended up not being able to solve their problem. It's not like they
still have the problem, right?
They still have the problem. It's a pity, really. But they at the end of the day, they couldn't even cover costs because it was too expensive for them. So there's an issue. if there's, but I don't see a way to solve this. Maybe Sue, you.
I mean, I think it's a very real problem, and one short-term solution, or it's not the long-term global solution for this, but in the short term, we're seeing a lot of trend of sort of emerging market to emerging market solutions being built. So there's companies in India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Pakistan now selling software to markets all over Africa who can buy their SaaS solution. Sometimes it is the best product in the market, and sometimes it isn't. But that company can't afford the Silicon Valley equivalent. And I think we'll see more of that in terms of like geodesic cross-border collaboration compared to everything coming from Europe and Silicon Valley to the global south.
I think that makes a lot of sense because it's way easier for, again, someone from India to relate with problems that are going through, let's say, Africa or South America regarding making payments or pricing than a company that is in the US and has always been working with Europe, for example. So
yeah, the cost of goods sold will be a little bit lower, but of course, at the end of the day, still think of cloud-based solutions. We all work with the same providers. Those providers are mostly in the US, and they won't charge lower fees for companies in India or in Latin America. So the price point at which you have to sell your products isn't that different. Once you've factored out R&D and the ability to capitalize R&D into your balance sheet, etc. The cost of goods sold actually isn't that much different in India or for a product built and ran from India than it is if it's the same product but ran from Colombia, from Portugal, from the Netherlands, it ends up being the same.
Sure. One example about setting up your prices regarding based on where you're going to be offering your services. I actually met Sue at Web Summit in Lisbon in November last year, in the past year. And Web Summit, they're going to have the first edition in Brazil, right? That, of course, going to focus more on Latin America. And I was talking to the organization regarding a booth, and the cost to have a booth and to get tickets to the event in Brazil is a third of the cost to have exactly the same thing for the event in Lisbon. And their approach was, look, someone in Brazil will not pay 1,200 euros to get that space, but they may pay 400 euros for example, or dollars. So, I mean, having that, making sure that you are adapting your product and even your pricing to the market that you were expanding is really, really important. Something else that came on the previous discussion that we had was regarding how the pandemic and how the last years changed the way that we do business and how it helped companies to do business cross-border or to be borderless, right? Does anyone have something to share regarding that?
I think that the pandemic accelerated for a lot of entrepreneurs in countries around the world, it accelerated their confidence to raise, build partnerships, do biz dev, hire folks outside their home country. The ubiquity of Zoom allowed everybody to start to do that a lot more. Lots more startups I know are much more of a global remote team than they would have been otherwise and have a more global cap table. And I'm curious if you all agree, but I think it also has underscored some of the problems I know that Globalfy is trying to solve and others of doing this cross-border business, because things accelerated also, all the challenges with doing it became a little more apparent, which is why it's a really exciting time for anyone on this call who's building in the cross-border space.
I agree. And I mean, one of the problems regarding cross-border transactions, even on software as a service or e-commerce, is regarding collecting payments. So Melissa, you were mentioned regarding companies from India, let's say, selling to Africa, for example. How important is, in your opinion, and then I would like to hear Sue and Joan's opinion too, regarding setting up local payment methods when you were expanding to new markets versus just having, let's say, US dollars and international credit cards being accepted through Stripe, for example? How do you see that?
So, India is a unique case for many reasons. It's also a very large SaaS market, right? McKinsey projects India to overtake China as the largest SaaS nation selling globally in the next few years. And I mention that to say, there's a lot of specific problems. The rupee is not convertible. The regulators don't allow quick currency changes in and out of the currency. So typically Indian companies are having to accept dollars abroad, or the customer will have to remit rupees in. Most of them accept dollars abroad. Stripe, as an example, has been building local presence in India and enables global clients to make payouts to companies in that company's local currency, and Stripe does it. Other global companies like Zoho, FreshBooks, Razorpay, et cetera, are all solving those kinds of things as well. But essentially, due to local capital convertibility rules, it's nearly impossible to accept in like a local South African currency or otherwise to remit back.
But if I want to sell my software in India, I mean, is the market ready to make their payments in US dollars through, let's say, debit cards or credit cards?
Oh, absolutely. But I don't know how much of a market there would be for that in terms of how much propensity to pay like US prices in the local market.
Okay.
But yes, but paying in local currency is possible as long as it's in domestic shore. You can't exchange rupees like offshore.
Yeah, nice, perfect. Thank you.
And hedging has also had a lot of, across Asia, not just India, hedging has had a lot of developments in the past 5-8 years in terms of the ability to do kind of Singapore-based derivatives contracts and start to hedge currencies.
Yes, and a lot of companies from India, they set up an entity in the US too to be able to collect payments and bill the customers from all over the world, right? So that would not be.
Yeah, Delaware and Singapore are the two hubs.
Nice. So how's your perspective regarding that?
In terms of collecting money locally?
Yes.
India, as Melissa said, in a way, I think they're quite lucky compared to the UK, for example. It has its big enough domestic market for people to focus on, whilst in the UK, especially after Brexit, which triggered officially 2 years ago, happened maybe long time ago, triggered 2 years ago, and not until then people realized, oh, hang on, I'm paying tax now to import to the the EU, and they lose the freedom of people, freedom of movement of the goods, and all of a sudden the cost of running a business in the UK to serve the EU clients has becoming more or maybe the same to provide a service in the US or elsewhere. So that in that case for them, it's advisable for them to have different currency accounts and hedge their currencies in a more dynamic way, have your own different financial planning or budgeting for different currency accounts. Whilst in, I guess, Melissa's story, for companies who has a local domestic market, but they have huge exposure, for example, in US dollar or Singapore dollar, it's worthwhile to look at in a 1 year or 2 year horizon when you are doing your financial planning or budgeting in terms of currency hedging. So hedge it in one go, or hedge it based on whatever you plan for your financial year. Whilst for smaller companies, for example, if you are selling jewelry in the EU before, and now you want to sell it to elsewhere, it's worthwhile to really have a multi-currency account and really watch really closely where the value of the sterling is, where the value of the euro is, where the value of the dollar is, and exchange them timely and make sure you hedge your risk of the fluctuation of the FX rates.
Nice, amazing. Thank you, Sue. And João, you're selling your product to different markets. Are you guys setting up different pricings, and are you guys localizing the payment methods they will accept? How you guys handling that?
Yeah, so we are B2B, and B2B is a bit of a different game. Also, we are, I would say, B to large B. So we tend to serve payments institutions. We don't serve merchants directly, and so we don't need to or up until today we didn't have to set up local entities to receive payments locally. So credit cards, bank transfers work. But of course we help customers that are in the B2C space, right? So payments companies who or B2 small b that sell through to C, and that's completely different. And so in the past I actually worked for an acquiring bank in the Netherlands, and one of the services that they had was to help set up entities in different regions to be able to charge payments, or to invoice customers in different currencies. And a little bit to Ramon's a question in the chat box. It's in Spanish, but I'll answer in English. It is so a lot of acquirers have the ability to do cross-border payments. Some don't, of course, but a lot of them do. And so typically you don't need to install or to work with different PSPs or gateways or pasarelas de pagos. You can simply install one, and if the shopper presents a card from abroad, it's transparent to you. You don't need to worry about it. Of course, you will want to work with acquirers who have local payment methods in the markets that are of interest to you, that have them available, that will enable you to accept payments with those methods. So I would say that's so instead of finding a lot of different integrations, maybe going with one that's a little bit more international or more global makes sense in some cases. In some other cases, indeed, going with very specific integrations, I wouldn't say per country, but by payment method also makes sense.
Yeah.
Just to give a context to everybody here, Ramon asked it regarding if he's selling his products or service online to different countries and into different currencies. Would it be necessary to connect to different payment processors, right? And based on the market that you're looking for, I mean, there's options that will, let's say, on Latin America, when we look to that as a block or as a whole, there are a lot of payment processors or payment gateways like Mercado Pago, Pago Brasil, Boa Compra, e-banks that with one integration, they're going to open you they're going to allow you to receive in local payments, to accept local payments, I'm sorry, such as Boleto Bancário in Brazil, Oxxo in Mexico, and so on. So there's a lot of solutions that will allow you to, as Joe mentioned, through one connection, accept local payments. Stripe, of course, is probably like the largest payment processor for software as a company, for SaaS companies, and a lot of the e-commerce transactions that we see on Shopify, they go through Stripe. So Stripe has a lot of options to accept local payments too, based on your entities. But yes, Ramon, if you're looking to sell to a specific market, and that market will be really significant for you, in my opinion, it's really, really important that you can accept payments in local with local methods. Another question, guys,
just add to that, Stripe is great for you to push out MVP, but I think most of my clients use Stripe, give me the feedback that it is way too expensive. So if you have a focused market, you have a set group of audience or clients definitely use a local bank account, or give them a bank account to pay the invoice rather than just use Stripe. You know, be a little bit more diligent than lazy, I'd say.
Now, I think here we have another question from Francisco, that in this case, I think that we can go a little bit deeper too, with everybody sharing a little bit about their opinion, is regarding hiring cross-border. So let's say in our case here, Globalfy, we have team members in different countries, right? And it's true, it's not that easy to make payments to those contractors or employees from in different legislations, different currencies. So something that I think that the pandemic make it process faster, and there's a lot of new companies that are actually they're kind of into the fintech space too, are the companies such as Deal or On Top that allows you and help companies to get employment of record in different countries, and to hire and make payments into different currencies. I mean, does anyone have anything to share regarding hiring abroad and managing that distributed team members? I
mean, it's obviously the benefit of a pandemic, as Melissa previously touched upon. You know, the pandemic kind of like opened a lot of opportunities for doing this kind of business, and the clients don't expect you to have a massive office, 100 employees in one big building. So I mean, that's probably why Deal becomes so popular and successful. There are companies like remote.com, and I think Payroll does that too. I think it's payroll.com, I need to double check, that they allow you to hire internationally and pay internationally. And obviously our service is also, you know, by providing multi-currency accounts, is for you to allocate whatever income that you have in your base currency and convert it into, for example, we can do Chinese yuan, Singapore dollar, Hong Kong dollar, Indian rupee, and we can, well, you can just basically convert to any currencies to pay your local staff. But I'm not sure in terms of regulations, you know, I'm sure there are companies who are bound to that. I don't know if anyone who's got any information on that.
We are partners with Deal, and then if our team can share on the chat here their link, I actually have discounts for customers that are for companies that are customers and they onboard to Deal. That Deal helps you not just make the payment, so they act as like a payment collector and then processor, and making the payments, distributing the payments all over the world, but they help you with the process of hiring legally those employees in other countries. So they work as the employer on record. So actually they hire the team member for you, they manage everything, and they make the payments to those employees to process the payments and so on. We use, and there's a lot of other of our customers that they don't have employees, but they have like international contractors. So therefore they have someone that works part-time for them somewhere else, not like a total employee relationship, and they're gonna pay through wire transfer, for example. So yeah, I think that there's different ways for you to help on that and make those payments into different regions.
And I would just add, meeting or having the chance to work with lots of very early startups, you know, entrepreneurs that have their first 10 people and their first revenue. Don't skimp on finding a good startup lawyer early, or good advice, you know, good tax advice as you're getting set up with your company. A lot of, I'm saying, sort of speaking to any entrepreneurs in the audience, that a lot of them say, oh, once we are making a bunch of money, then we'll sort all of this out. This is one area where you want to get these things. I'm not saying spend tons, you don't need fancy lawyers, but you need the right advice to understand your country and the country where your contractors or partners are early, and get things set up properly at the beginning versus winging it and hope, you know, getting into problems.
Yeah, myself as an entrepreneur, I have to tell that we always forget about that. We always start start developing and deploying, and then we see what's going to come next, and then we think about, oh, I should have hired an attorney earlier, right? But that's something that we definitely have to pay attention. And Melissa, as investor, I mean, the whole goal here is not talk about investment, raising capital right now, but I mean, for fintechs, right? How is the market right now to collect, to raise capital? I'm sorry. How do you see that, and what are the opportunities that you guys are looking for right now?
So obviously the US market is sort of doom and gloom in terms of the general consensus is that it's much harder to raise, etc. And while that is somewhat true, particularly because public markets are down so much that there's no multiples to benchmark as, startup on that gives you any kind of valuation you would want as you grow. While all of that is true, there are so many areas in fintech that are still so ripe for growth, and where this is as best a time as ever, where there's a little bit less hype in the market. There's less tourists of people jumping in just because it's a sexy sector. And sort of the real builders are absolutely creating products and solving customer problems in a very meaningful way. And there are still lots of investors, I mean, us included, but many, many others who have the capital and are keen to invest in this market, particularly when it's a little bit less frothy. And so I think for entrepreneurs, stay focused and don't believe all the Twitter gloom in terms of where things are in the market. That being said, there are absolutely for fintech, both B2B and B2C, more focus on unit economics, more focus on sort of proving out true product market fit and true demand for what you're building earlier in your cycle for fundraising, as well as kind of this, it was very popular in fintech to say, we're just going to blow it out and get scale, and then we'll, with some kind of software, and then we'll turn on lending. And that will be our way to monetize no matter what our product is. And there's a lot more skepticism around that.
Nice, perfect, amazing perspective. Thank you very much for sharing with us. I mean, we have here another question regarding collecting payments to different payment processors. I mean, guys, other than Stripe, do you know other payment processor that operates in a global scale that can give?
There's some that are actually, I would say, significantly more global than Stripe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So some acquirers are more global than Stripe. So WorldPay, Worldline, very global, and then a lot also. So for instance, Square, I don't think that Square is someone mentioned Square in the chat box. I don't think that Square is a very global one. It's very well known in the US and in Latin America in certain places as well. But yeah, ultimately there isn't such a thing as a truly global acquirer, I would say, or a tool, even less so a payment service provider. So payment service providers are almost by definition local or regional. I would, as someone in the payments industry who has worked for acquirers, I would really go shop around, go with the newer players. For instance, in Europe, we have two of the most impressive customers, I'd say, or two of the most impressive companies in the payments scene that are our customers: Viva Wallet and SaltPay. SaltPay is from the guys from StoneCo in Brazil, so very global as well. And I would say that companies like that are a little bit younger in SaltPay's case, or a little bit how can I say, that grew, forged. So Viva Wallet was actually acquired by partially acquired by JP Morgan recently. So it's it provides a really deep global reach, but in a different way, in a way that's more technologically enabled or based, a bit like Stripe, but Stripe is very focused in the US still. So I wouldn't also call it a global player.
Yeah, we have João Paulo talking a little bit about PayPal. So I'm going to talk from the US. PayPal is widely accepted in the US. No problem to collect or to make payments through PayPal here in the US. How is it in Europe or Asia or other markets that you guys are based at?
Expensive.
Expensive. That's it. Yeah, that's the.
But
that's
other
really...
than being expensive, is PayPal as big in Europe or as important in Europe as it is in the US, or not that much?
I think it was. This is probably my point of view as a consumer. Okay, I think it was larger than it in the past than it is now. I think it lost some penetration because of its prices. I would say, and right now, for instance, the last time I used PayPal was actually to pay a bounty. So a gray hacker, a gray hat hacker who discovered a little vulnerability in one of our setups came to me, gave us the recipe to fix it. We did, and the payment method of choice is PayPal because it's just convenient to you don't need to set up a company or whatever to receive payments.
No cryptocurrencies.
Sorry.
No cryptocurrencies.
Also, they suggested cryptocurrencies, but we don't do that. But I would say if you're an established business, PayPal can be useful for sure, and from a shopper's perspective, it offers some assurances. Maybe a shopper is as safe with PayPal as with a credit card, especially if it goes via a credit card payment. But yeah, there's a lot of issues with PayPal, I would say, for established.
Yeah, I think one of the issues which I think affect the consumers most here in Europe overall is that they can't configure different currencies because there are different currencies in Europe, and they somehow always mess up. For example, if you want to check out in euro, they recognize your sterling card. So basically the principle behind charging a card is they go to your euro balance, check if you have euro, and then if you don't have anything or you have partial, they charge the partial and then charge your base currency, the remaining or the whole if you didn't have the charging currency. But PayPal somehow always mess it up, and on top, what makes it worse is that they obviously added their crazy spread on the exchange rate. I think that messes people up, and obviously it takes ages, albeit they have good support to refund or anything, but it's just not really great user experience. Whilst like Joel said, in the past few years, you can see a lot of European players, they are kind of like perfectizing the checkout process or the currency conversion configuration. I think that's why they lose their market. Another thing is that we kind of like touched upon as well is a lot of acquirers or payment companies are more and more take steps backwards and focusing on their strong markets because the regulations getting more and more difficult, and people just want to really make sure they are compliant with their local market and grab their strong markets and give up markets they're not doing really well. A great example is N26. They exited the UK together with Brexit, obviously, because they reckon Europe is a big enough, EU is a big enough market and good enough for market for them to provide their service. So the advice to the people who ask about this question is definitely, like George said, shop around, do your research about which company is good at the specific markets that you're good at, you're operating in, and then use them.
Nice. So thank you very much. Well, we have another like 7 minutes here, but we have to wrap in 5 minutes. I have here Daniela that asked about payment methods in Latin America. Daniela, we have an article in our blog. If you go to globalfy.com/es for Spanish /blog, or just globalfy/blog, you are able to search for payment methods, and we have a lot of options for localized payment methods in Latin America. I have an article just explain more about that. And well, so to wrap it up here, I would like to can the three of you just share like a 1 minute quick suggestion for entrepreneurs that are looking to grow their business, mostly in fintech or technology in general, e-commerce. What they should look in terms of collecting payments and processing payments into different markets. So Sue, as if you want to start here.
Right, definitely do your research. Don't be lazy. I'm not trying to be aggressive here, but don't just think, oh, I'm going to use Stripe. And yeah, obviously go to forums like this, and go to Globalfy's blog, and check all the information, make network with people who are doing similar things like you are doing, and then ask their advice, exchange information.
Thank you very much. So Melissa?
So I would say to entrepreneurs, building in this space and looking to solve your problem is keep your life as simple as possible. Building a fintech product is already so complicated and such a highly regulated industry that you don't want to make your startup journey unnecessarily complex by operating in too many markets too quickly, where you might not have enough context on the domestic regulatory or tax or legal regimes, etc. So as you go global, be very intentional and thoughtful about which markets, and make sure you have very trusted kind of local partners and insights to help you along the way.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Especially, I agree 100% with Melissa, especially if you sell physical goods. So if you sell physical goods, you need, you'll have issues with logistics, etc. But if you sell digital goods, so if you can truly sell globally, then why not have a global setup? Because it's a lot simpler. You don't need to overcome issues that traditional retailers have. And in that case, of course, card payments still are king and queen, probably the two larger ones globally for cross-border payments. And so if it's almost a no-brainer that you need to accept cards, international cards, especially Visa, MasterCard, in the regions that we've been addressing. But then indeed think about and consider analyzing your trends, your sales, and setting up more local setups or market-specific payment setups in countries and regions that are working well for you.
Nice, thank you. Well, with that, we wrap it up this session. Thank you very much for your time, John, Sue, and Melissa. It was really, really nice to learn from. I learned a lot from you. I hope the audience has learned a lot too. Now, in another 2 minutes, we're gonna have a session between Pedro and Marcus from Vitex. He's going to be talking about e-commerce cross-border and how Vitex were able to build up their business from Latin America to the whole globe. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you very much. Hope to talk to you soon again. See you. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.